Hi, I'm Andrew with Ether Automation, and in this video, I'm going to continue on from the last video where we talked about setting up an ERP system for your manufacturing company inside Zoho Creator. Okay. Now, if you haven't seen the last video, you should watch it here. There's a little thing up at the top right that will direct you there if you're on desktop. This video, we're going to continue on with some more advanced architecture that will enable the rest of the app to be built. So in this video, we're going to add employees, work orders, assembly time, pick lists, some more stuff around items and logging time. So let's get started. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and hopefully it is the right screen. Otherwise, this will be a short video. Okay, so this is where we left off after the last video, right? We have products, vendors, sales orders. We're going to clean this up probably in the video after this. But for this video, we're going to create some new modules. So in order to create a work order has a couple things we're going to need to be aware of. Number one, a work order is assigned to an employee. Number two, a work order may have a pick list. So if you're making Coca-Cola, you have a bottle and you have a liquid. So you may have a pick list of one bottle and 500 milliliters of Coke, right? So we're going to build some of that out. And then finally, we're going to do some stuff around bin location and time logging. So I'm going to start out with employees. I'm going to click edit this application, and I'm going to create a new form, right? So we're going to click this, new form, create from scratch, and we're going to create one called employees, right? So we're going to start out with some basic employee information, such as their name, and this will be their first name and last name. We're going to add their email address, right? And then we're going to have a drop-down for current status. And by current status, what I mean is, are they clocked in or are they clocked out? Right? If someone's working that day, we should know. If they're not working, we should also know, right? We're going to have another drop down for active. Right? And this is going to have employed and no longer employed. Right? You don't want to necessarily delete an employee record when they're no longer employed by you, because you still need to track what they shipped, what they built for internal metrics at a later date. Right? And then finally, we're going to add something called average time delta percent. And we're going to make this a percent field. Now, what this field will eventually do is calculate what is the gap percentage-wise between this employee and the average assembly time, right? It's not a huge thing, but probably on video 17 of this series, we're going to set up some various some metrics, some dashboards for the owner or a consultant to come in and look at, what's going on. Is it one employee, or is management expecting having unreasonable expectations, that kind of thing. So this field is something that will come into play later on. Now, we're going to want to add another module because we actually want a subform. So I'm going to middle click and go back so I can make a new form, right? And this one is going to be called assembly time. So from scratch, we're going to call it employee assembly time. And this is going to have three fields, right? This first one is going to be the product. So it's a lookup. The second one is going to be the average time. And we're going to do that as a number. right? And just to make this easier at a later date, we're going to add a help text. And this help text is going to say, this is counting in milliseconds because computers like milliseconds. And finally, we're going to have something here called time delta, which is also going to be a number. Right? And this, again, is going to have help text counted in milliseconds. Right? So what these are is it's going to be used to track an employee and how long they actually take to assemble a certain product. And what that is, that assembly time compared to the team average or something like that. It could be the team average, or it could be the target's assembly time. This will be determined in a later video. So if I go back to this employee and I have a subform, and I'm going to need to refresh. And now let's add the subform, and that subform should have employee assembly time. I'm going to click done. There it is. All right. So now this is going to track employees. All right. Now that we have employees in the system, I'm going to exit out. We're going to click done here. Exit out of that. I can click done. So we now have employees, which means a work order can be created and it can be assigned to an employee. So let's go ahead and create that work order module. Cool. So let's start with the single line. We'll call this the work order number. And then beneath that, we want a number field. And this one is going to be important for later on. We'll call it position in queue. That is how I spell that. Great. Spelling counts in code. So let's have a lookup here. And this one is going to be the related sales orders. All right. We're actually going to want this to be a multi-select because it could be done that way. Sales order name. And then we want to do the same thing with this lookup for purchase orders. Multi-select as well. So we're going to have the related sales orders, related purchase orders for this work order, right? Because they could be assembling, some employee could be assembling, multiple products or one product for multiple sales orders, and we may be waiting on parts from purchase orders to complete this work order. Finally, we're going to have to look up here for the employee, and we're going to use the name for the employee. Only one employee gets assigned. Now, I know I said finally, but we need a couple of other fields. So let's add the drop down here, and we're going to call this status. And the status fields are in queue, in progress, and completed. All right, we're going to add the start date. And then we're going to have two new fields that are going to be used later. Right. The first one is going to be the calculated assembly time. Right. So we're going to add a number here. Calculated assembly time. And we're going to put this in, we're going to put in a description, some help text. Calculated in hours. Right. It's important to have the time in there. Right. And in fact, if it's in hours, I'm going to delete this and we're going to make this a decimal field. Because you can have half an hour for assembly. Calculated assembly time, and help text is calculated in hours. Finally, because we have the start date and we have the calculated assembly line or calculated assembly time date, and we have its position in the queue, we're going to want a field in here that says calculated delivery dates. Now, this field will be programmatically generated later, and we're going to do this in this series, but we do want the field in there at this point because it will be used later on. Great. So the work order is going to have two subforms in it. The first one is the work order, like assembly line items. Hey, you're making 100 bottles of Coca-Cola, right? The second one is going to be the pick list. Hey, in order to assemble 100 bottles of Coca-Cola, you need 100 bottles and 100 units of Coca-Cola to fill in those bottles, right? And so the employee will need to go and pick those off the rack or however they're stored. We're going to talk about bin locations a little later, but we're going to want to do this. Now, for both of these, we actually want these to be other modules as well. This makes a number of things very easy for us in terms of finding work order rows in code. So let's go ahead and I'm going to middle click back. And I'm going to click done here. And I'm going to create a new module or new form. And this is called work order assembly line items. Okay, and start this out. Remember, this is going to be a line item in the work order. So we're going to start by saying, hey, you need to make this product. All right, product name, done. Next, we want a number field, and we're going to call this amount to be assembled. All right, and so as an example, if someone orders 100 Coca-Cola, this would be 100. I'm going to add another number field called current number of assembled, so you can track, hey, I made 50 bottles of Coca-Cola today. We're going to do the other 50 tomorrow. I'm going to have another lookup here. And this is going to be on the sales order line item. We're going to put the ID. This is going to be programmatically generated. We would never want a user to actually fill this out themselves. But if someone has multiple items on order, we want to track, hey, as you fill the order in terms of the work order, what can be shipped and what can't be. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side because there may or may not be purchase orders. So this is going to be the purchase order line items, and it's going to be the ID. Now, because you can have multiple purchase orders for this thing, for this assembly, this is going to be a multi-select, and we're going to click done. Finally, we're going to have a drop-down. We're going to have two new drop-downs right here. The first one is going to track the assembly status, right? And you can have it as not started, completed, right? And the other drop down is going to track the available stock status. So we're going to call this stock status, because if you don't have enough bottles to ship 100 bottles of Coke, you're not going to do so good. So we're going to say there is no inventory. There's partial inventory. And then finally, there is inventory available, right? Now, this, everything except for everything on this will be programmatically populated when the work order is created. And we're going to cover that in probably video 5, so stick around. So a user will never actually need to select or change these. This will just happen and allow you to track where, some work order is in the assembly line process, right? So I'm going to go back to my work order. I'm going to refresh the page so that this becomes an option when I add the subform. Work order assembly line items. Done. All right. So that's the first thing. The next thing we're going to want is the pick list, right? But we can't quite do a pick list yet, because the pick list, what we want on the pick list is the product, quantity needed, quantity on hand, of course, the related PO line items, because if we're waiting for something, we want to know what it's linked to. But also, if it's already on hand, we want to know where is it in the warehouse. Specifically, what is the bin location? So let's start by adding the bin location. So from scratch, bin location, create form. We're going to have the bin name. We're going to have two fields for the latitude. That's how you spell that. And the longitude. Now, your business may have things, I put these in as numbers. Your business may have like B10, so it's in B10, this is malleable. You could change this however you need. Then finally, we're going to have a subform on this. This subform doesn't need to be its own module, so we're going to call it a blank form. And on this subform, we're going to have two things. One is the product name, and two, it's going to be a number for available inventory at location. Right? So within a bin, you can see what is actually in that bin, and this will be used later on to calculate or to identify on the pick list, what do we need to get from what bins. So I'm going to click done, and now we can go and eventually we're going to create the work order pick list. And so we are going to do this by creating a new form. Again, from scratch, work order pick. Pick list is one word. Yeah. Now, on this pick list, we want some of the obvious things like a product. We're going to want the quantity needed, which is a number. We want quantity on hand. We want the pick list. So this is not the pick list. We want a bin location. Because a person is going to look at this and go, where do I need to get this product? So this is a bin location, and it's going to be a bin name. And finally, we're going to want a lookup for the purchase order line items. And we're going to put in the ID. So now I'm going to go back to my work order. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to add in the subform for the pick list. Order pick list, click done. Now I'm going to want to rename this. This is the assembly line items, and this is the pick list, right? So this is now our work order. This will eventually be automatically populated based on the sales orders and the purchase orders and who's doing what and the queue, blah, 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 blah. But this will be everything you would need to know about what do I need to assemble, what do I need to assemble it, how long should it take, when is it going to be done, who's doing it, what are we waiting for? And again, we're going to cover all this, how to tie all these pieces together in another video. So to close this one out, we want to add a couple more things. Let's go back to our items, products. We're going to open the form. So we already have the name and the SKU, but we want a couple more things, such as available inventory. We're going to want another one for allocated inventory. We want another one for the ideal time to assemble product. This would be what your management would set. Hey, it should take 10 minutes to assemble one bottle of Coca-Cola, right? And you'd set that in here. Of course, this is going to be measured in minutes. We're going to do the same thing down here. Average time to assemble products. Again, this is going to be measured in minutes. This will be calculated in a later video. We're going to want a vendor in here. We're going to want bin locations. This is a multi-select lookup because there may be multiple bins with these items. Then we want a single line field for Zoho inventory product ID and another number here for starting balance inventory. Okay. Now, this should allow you to track most things in a product, but not its components. So we want to add a subform here. And we are going to add 2 fields. So these are components required. We're going to add 2 fields. One is a lookup to a product. The other is going to be a number field for quantity required for assembly. And there we go. So now we know for a particular product, how many what components is needed to assemble this, which will then be used with some code and some math to create a pick list for a work order to eventually build for a sales order and ship out, right? Now, before we close this one out, we're going to want to go and modify 4 things from our previous video so that these things get tied together. So let's go ahead and do that now. The first one is the purchase order line items. Purchase order line items. Now, if you remember on the last call or last video, we had the sales order line items. We also want to link the work order line items. We also want to go onto the purchase order. I go down to here, go to purchase orders, open builder. We want to have the related work order. Work orders, the multi-select, let's click done. Next thing we want to do is do the same thing on the sales order line item. So you remember from our previous video, we created the line items. And again, we want to actually link the sales order line item to a work order line item. And then we want to do the same thing on the sales order. We want to link it to a work order. Done. And then finally, this is the last thing. This is the last finally, I promise. We're going to add the same thing to the shipment received line items. If you remember on the last video, we created a shipment received line items. We want this to be linked to a bin location. So I'm going to look up and I'm going to do a bin location. We're going to do the bin name. We're going to have this be a single line, right? Or a single drop down. Because when you receive product, it needs to go into bins so that it can be used. So we want to link those line items to the bins. In the next video, we're going to start with some styling stuff. We're going to build 2 more modules, but it's mostly styling. Because right now, if you look at it, let me click done. Let me access this application. There is no way at all. Like if I go to work orders and I open the work order, there's no way this is going to be helpful for any user. There's too many fields. Things aren't filled. I'm not sure what I need to fill out. I'm not sure what I would need to click on. So in the next video, we're going to start disabling some fields, hiding some fields, because something like, let's go to a sales order, right? This Zoho inventory sales order ID. I don't want users to change that. That's to link it. So we should hide that. And maybe the order date needs to be disabled because once they place the order, that date doesn't change. So we're going to go through this module or this app, and we're going to clean it up in a way that makes it easier to use so that when we start coding, we can navigate through it and things that you would use or the fields that you would enter into or not enter and just need to read will only be displayed so that it's a little easier to navigate and a little easier to use. I hope you found this video helpful. I will see you in the next video.